Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the invitation, Mukesh, to talk about IFAS fertilizer recommendations. Some people may think it's kind of a mystery. Well, if you do, I'm going to clear that up for you in the next 20 minutes. We've been developing fertilizer recommendations for decades. Kind of want to go over that process and kind of talk a little bit about how it's evolved. So again, thanks for the invitation. So this is the subjects I want to talk about this morning. Being an old guy who's been around for many decades, I always like to start with a historical perspective because I've been associated with IFAS since the late 70s, believe it or not, and just kind of going back and taking a little bit through time about how fertilizer recommendations have worked, where they came from, where we are now. Talk about who does it, how do they do it. And then the committee that maybe some of you have heard about, out there as what we'll call the Plant Nutrient Oversight Committee. And I'm going to explain what the role of that committee is and what the purpose is. Then a little bit about a nutrient management renaissance, research renaissance that's happening right now that is really going to help us improve and modify and modernize our recommendations for a variety of crops across the state. And then I'll kind of end that up with IFAS recommendations and the relationship with BMPs, because they may not necessarily be one and the same thing. So going back into history, I'm a collector of old documents. This is the oldest one that I had. It was from 46 years ago, 1977. But this is some of where recommendations would be published. Our faculty at the time would publish fact sheets, and this one happened to be an agronomy fact sheet that detailed and discussed the fertilization of field and forage crops. For some reason, they like to use yellow paper, maybe so they would stand out on the rack or something like that. But these fact sheets, this one was about 12 or 14 pages, would be issued to county extension agents, and they would distribute those. And in there, you'll find these tables of fertilizer rates. Okay, and this is maybe the most basic table. Going back that long, is you just see a phosphorus fertilizer rate and a potassium fertilizer rate based on a soil test. So we were actually doing soil test-based recommendations back in the 70s. We were not using the extractants back then that we use now, but still there was the soil test lab, and that's what P&K is based on. The nitrogen was not based on the soil test. You can see it there on the right side. The end recommendation for things like corn and cotton and peanuts, and here in these row crops. So the people that did this back then were basically a group of extension specialists. And there were 6 individuals that put together, these recommendations. David Wright's name is there, 1977. David Wright, you probably know, some of you know, he just passed away a couple of weeks ago. 46 years ago, David Wright was involved in all the way up through his career on the row crops recommendations. Dr. Kidder is still around. He's long been retired. He lives in Gainesville. Dr. Street's still around. He lives in Texas, I think. So, but the point being here is there was a collaboration between agronomy, soils people, horticulture people that put their heads together and developed these recommendations. Moving forward, then this is 12 years later, February 1989. It had moved from agronomy facts to notes in soil science, still using the yellow paper. Here's the table of values again that you see, look very similar to the one in 77. There is some additions though. This is the evolution of the recommendations. The one before, you didn't see a target pH. Now you see a target pH, so we were running a line requirement, to get to the pH for that particular crop. A broader categorization of the soil test values, which we have since discarded and abandoned, but it ran from very low to very high. And then, a straight nitrogen recommendation down the left-hand column there next to the pH. But what you see here is footnotes. And fertilizer recommendations go beyond just rates per acre into management of sources and timing and placement. And that's what the footnotes are there for, to talk about management of the nutrients, not just the nutrient rates themselves. So when you find these publications, if you want to know what's the full recommendation, you not only look at the rates, but you also dig out the footnotes, and you have to read those as well. Now, when a soil sample comes into the Extension Soil Testing Lab and the recommendation is created and the report is kicked out, the recommended rates come with that report, but the footnotes are attached to it as well for a little bit broader recommendation beyond the rate to involve management. And then there's some references there about, publications that were in the system that got into even greater detail. Here's the group that put this together in 79, Dr. Kidder again, Dr. Hanlon, and Dr. Chambliss. And so you see the number of people went from 6 down to 3. So there were some changes in, the faculty assignments across that period of time. And, the number of people that have contributed started to decrease a bit. So moving on to present day, this is the agronomic crop recommendations for, currently on our IFAS system. And now you see the authors there are Dr. Maya Verlipu, David Wright, and Gerald Kidder. So 2 of those people are not in the system anymore. Dr. Maya Verlipu is the only one left. But again, very similar kind of presentation. You can see the table really hasn't changed much over the years from the 70s to now. You see that, the list of crops, target pH, NPK recommendations, and then footnotes. So that's where we are right now. I think we're probably on the road to move towards a little bit different way to present the recommendations, because looking up what the IFAS recommendation is for a particular crop is a bit tedious, because unless you study the soil sample and you get the recommendation back and you see the whole picture, you're just looking at a publication. You have to dig out the footnotes, and what does the footnotes say that go along with these rates? So I think we're heading for probably some changes to make things easier. So who does this? It's simply IFAS Research and Extension faculty. There's 5 departments that right now are the main ones where faculty reside that will do the research and the extension, develop the recommendations: soil, water, ecosystem sciences, agronomy, port science, environmental work, and AVE. So you have faculty on campus, but you also have a lot of those faculty that are located at RECs, and they are very important in being part of the collaborative team to put recommendations together, because most of the time they're doing the work out in the field and, with collaborators in the industry to do the research. And that's what we're doing right now, to get some real world answers and be able to modernize recommendations. So Gainesville faculty, RECs, and also extension agents as well. So how do we do this? If a recommendation exists, it's going to stay there until someone changes it. Once it's there, it's kind of carved in stone. They don't just disappear or have a shelf life or anything like that. So in order to change or update a recommendation, we have to have something to base it on. It can't be just a faculty member dreaming up, I think I'll change the recommendation. Okay, so based on what? You have to have some unbiased science-based information to support that change. So faculty do research, they do their own research, their colleagues do research, even outside the state of Florida. Research is, done and published. But you can't do a research project that's going to solve or answer every question. So there has to be some best professional judgment involved when you're setting fertilizer rates and sources and timing and placement. So it's kind of a combination of those two. But you have to have a base of science to be able to say, we want to change this recommendation from X to Y, and here's why we want to do that, or why that's justified. So, the research ends up in some kind of published form. Obviously, the gold standard would be in a referee journal. Those take quite a while to get going and get in press sometimes. Other peer-reviewed articles or research reports or even some unpublished work will all go into this information bin from which recommendations are derived. So where are these studies published? National and international journals, Agronomy Journal, SSSA Journal, Port Science Journals, others. Our state society proceedings, though, have been probably more prominent than people realize as far as where published information resides. Florida State Horse Society just is still just met, and they still are in process. They're still existing. Southern Crop Science Society has gone away a few years ago, but there's still a lot of good information there. So before 2000, the extension specialists were the individual faculty who maintained or updated the recommendations, and they would put out their own fact sheets or EDIS documents or publications. There was a problem because we had some lack of uniformity across IFAS. We had cases where one faculty member might recommend one thing for a crop and someone might do something a little different, and then it was presented, you have conflicting information here, what are we supposed to do? So that was the advent of the Plant Nutrient Oversight Committee to monitor the situation and try to assure the uniformity of IFAS recommendations. That's a committee that's involves researchers, extension specialists, administrators. So uniformity was one thing we were looking at. This is 20 years ago, but also there was a push at the time to support statewide recommendations, kind of a one-size-fits-all thing. That's simple yet troublesome, because I think we're realizing that different regions, different areas may require different kind of fertilizer rates and management to match up with the site-specific conditions. And so I think we're probably moving away towards one-size-fits-all, towards a more from one-size-fits-all towards a more site-specific kind of situation. There was a handful of changes approved since 2000. Senate Bill 712 put a spotlight on our recommendations because growers now are required to keep track of their NMP applications and report those to FDACS, and how might those relate to the recommendations. People might have those questions. So PNOC now, it maintains internal consistency and assures the scientific integrity of IFAS recommendations, and sanctions the proposed recommendation changes that faculty put forward. So PNOC relies on faculty as the people that are doing will propose the changes. Recently, in the last couple of years, PNOC has been more active, received more proposals. There have been changes on carrots, citrus, sugarcane, potato, strawberry, and turfgrass, and I think more will come as more research is developed. The research renaissance that I mentioned has come from originally FDACS OAWP funding BMP projects, but the last couple of years, legislative budget requests have provided about $15 million for nutrient management research, stemming from discussions with growers, talking with Dr. Engel, our senior vice president, and expressing their concern about the accuracy of IFAS recommendations now in the production systems that they're using. And so legislature decided to put some money forward to do that. And these are funding up to 19 projects coming up this year on various crops. This is the picture of the state, which crops are being looked at, what the nutrients involved are. So we've got the state covered up pretty well. The legislature wanted us to concentrate on tomato, potato, citrus, corn, and snap beans. So those are covered up very well, but we have other crops as well that we're looking at. 68 IFAS faculty involved, from campus to RECs to county agents. Last comment just about, how do the recommendations and BMPs go together? Just some simple statements here. IFAS holds the recommendations. The recommendations belong to IFAS. As far as BMPs go, from the statewide standpoint or the state government standpoint, FDACS develops and adopts the BMPs by rule. I was around for the beginning of OAWP back in the 90s. The first director of OAWP said in a number of forums, the IFAS recommendation is the BMP. And that's kind of what a lot of people feel have gone forward. Will that always be the case? That remains to be seen. But right now, IFAS recommendation and BMPs are tied very closely together. My last slide here is just to, I know I've gone over this very quickly. Our BMP website, it's very easy URL to remember, just bmp.ifas.uf.edu, has information on there about crop recommendations, the research that we're doing, and information about PNOC and some of the recordings, minutes and some of the stuff that PNOC has gone through. So you can click on crops there to see some recommendations in the new format. Research will describe some of those projects I showed on the map, and then there's a link to PNOC if you want to see what PNOC does. With that, I will conclude, and thank you very much.